And good evening. I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer. The Oregon legislature just kicked off this week. Um, it's going to be an interesting year with Trump taking over as president and a much more red country that we live in. Oregon is a very blue state because it's blue from Portland down to Eugene, and then it hits over to Ashland. But a lot of the rest of the state is fairly red. In fact, Oregon voted more red than it's ever voted in decades during this last election. But we're going to talk with Representative Ed Deal about that. And what I also really called him about was there's a plan to kill thousands of barred, Barred owls. This all centers around the spotted owl controversy of the 1990s. And oops, we didn't get it quite right. It wasn't necessarily all the logging going on that was destroying the owls. It was this other owl. So now the solution, they think, is to go out and basically destroy all these owls. And a bipartisan group in the legislature in Oregon is going to fight this and saying we don't want this. But we're going to talk about that tonight. But let's get our sponsors in here. Albert Taylor, Endless Possibilities, working with people in Eugene and Springfield area with different abilities. If you're looking for employment or a place to work that really you go home at night and you feel good about yourself, that's Christiana Family Dentistry, Dr. Michael Bratlin. He's a rabble rouser. This guy, he just wants to make sure that everybody is heard, even if he disagrees with you. He wants to make sure you have a voice. He's like me, very anti-censorship. We do not like censorship at all. In fact, we were both thrilled with the latest news from not only X, but also Zuckerberg. And if you guys haven't, I don't promote, Joe Rogan doesn't need me to promote him. But Joe Rogan has a awesome interview with Mark Zuckerberg where he tells a lot about how the Biden administration pressured him, would call him and scream at his people to tell them to take things down. So now we need to work on Google because Google's still farting around. And I just got shut down for a week for talking about, that dark time with the COVID. And then we had to wear those MASKs and they didn't WORK. Well, that's all I SAID. And they pulled me for a week. I can't load anything on there for a week. And I'm on a little, I guess I'm in the penitentiary program for 3 months. So I have one strike, and if you get 3, you're out. So we need YouTube to get on board. Our other sponsor is New Leaf Hyperbarics and Wellness Center, Matt McCarl. He is also a guy who really believes in that people should have their voice and should be heard. And another guy who believes the same thing, Representative Ed Deal. And Ed, thanks for joining me. And I feel like I'm really Montana here. I'm like all flanneled out.
Real Montana. Yeah, I'm even from Montana, but I had to figure out how to wear this since I'm in the legislature.
Yeah, he's from Montana. I'm not. I'm here. He's there. It's a crazy little world. So today, was it today that was the big speech from the governor, or was that last week?
No, that was today, this afternoon. So
Governor Kotek, a Democrat, gave her speech. And how do you rate that speech, Ed?
Oh man, it was one of the most uninspiring speeches I've ever witnessed. I'm not in my unbiased opinion, and I was sitting in the front row, my wife and I, geez, it was rough. It was rough.
Because what Oregon has is for those people, and I think a lot of people in Oregon probably don't follow politics. I'm not saying it's ignorance. I'm just saying you don't follow politics. And Oregon has a super majority. So what you have in your state is the ability for Democrats to, because of the super majority, they can pass legislation to increase taxes. And there's not a whole lot that Republicans can do about that.
No, there's not. We're in a super minority. So they can pass whatever taxes they want. And they have signaled that they do intend to pass taxes. Rep. Rob Nose in his 2 of his articles that he writes in his local community was talking about now the Republicans can't stand in our way to pass much needed tax increases.
So what are
that's the attitude we have.
Yeah, and it's really tough for people, especially I think now in an era. What do you think Ed, we didn't talk about this, but I'm sure you're fine with this. What do you think that the Trump presidency is doing to the Oregon voter? Like, I mean, how do you think that's going to translate? I know there's a lot of people that I think it's invigorated a lot of, because what people don't understand is the largest voting bloc in Oregon is the non-affiliated voter. So it's not a Democrat or a Republican, it's the non-affiliates.
Right.
So you got a powerhouse of people there. If people join forces, do you think this will inspire people to do things differently, or maybe see how the world has changed a little bit?
I do. I think it's inspired our base voters in the state. They've been true believers of Trump, and they saw this red wave sweep across the country. Now it hit a blue wall in Oregon. I know that we voted more red than we have in the past. However, we lost a Republican congressional seat. Lori Chavez DeRemer lost, and we lost a House seat and a Senate seat in the state. So it did not go our way as far as the elections, and we lost every statewide race for Attorney General, Secretary of State, and so on. So it was a disappointing night in Oregon for Republicans. But I think our base, even with that, they are inspired. And I think this whole thing is making a lot of the NAVs really think about what kind of government that they want, what kind of role does government have. And I know a lot of young people, they've had it with this woke nonsense.
Yeah.
They don't want to be told how to think and what to do and all this gender nonsense. So they are really, I really think they're searching for truth. They want some moral clarity and moral direction. And they're going to find that with our values. And it's our job to communicate that to this younger generation and get them alive.
Do you think at all, Ed, that the Democrats, do they see that? Are they, I'll say it and you don't have to, but are they so blind? Because what I've noticed in the past in Oregon is it's like, well, we won. Now we're just going to move forward this. We have a clear note that this is where it's going to go. But, it's just like what's going on with the Greater Idaho movement. You got a huge chunk of your state that wants to join Idaho, not because they hate Oregon. They love Oregon, but they want to be listened to. And they've tried to meet up with the governor and she won't even return the phone call. So,
well, she talked a lot of platitudes about it today. She did.
Oh, really?
Yes. But then there's also, she'll go out and say, we need to protect Oregon values. She's spending she wants to spend $1 million a year with the Attorney General to fight the Trump agenda. So in reality, she doesn't want to listen to a big chunk of Oregon. And we have a new Secretary of State. He comes out with a mailer that calls Trump supporters anti-democratic, anti-woman extremists.
Who is the Secretary of State now? Is it Tobias?
Tobias Reed.
Yeah, they all just kind of circulate through the executive branch, don't they?
And a former state senator called, we have an enemy in the White House. So
isn't the secretary, when I ran for Secretary of State, I wanted to make that a nonpartisan office because it should be that the job of the Secretary of State is to fight for everyone, to make sure that the legislature and the governor are doing its job. And you can't do that if you're taking a side like that.
You can't. And so that was very frustrating to read. We actually had one of our Republican caucus members endorse Tobias Reed. And then he comes out with this statement. It's unbelievable to me. But so I have a meeting with him to talk about election integrity. Yes. I saw him today. So
do you think that Oregon, the biggest thing I heard all the time is, and if you look back at history, when vote by mail came in, you've seen a continual, no state should have a super majority. I don't think Montana should have a super majority. We have a majority, but I don't think we have a super majority. I don't think a state, you want balance. You got to have people that have different ideas so you can come up with plans. And if you have one one group like that, how do you get anything done? I mean,
Yeah,
you guys,
it's really tough. And we voted on our House rules today. And last year, it was my first year. I'm told these rules are okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, this year, I went and compared our House rules with other states. Our rules are designed to efficiently execute the agenda from the majority party and minimize the debate and discussion from the minority party. That's the truth.
how do
And
you go
yeah,
ahead?
no, so I said I recommended some changes to our House rules to try and alleviate that, because they got to realize that this is a divided state, and there's a huge amount of discontent, and we see our total world perspective is completely different. And if they don't give us a voice in here, um, then it's going to get worse.
Well, you're gonna be Californicated,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and all of a sudden these people have no voice and no rep. It's supposed to be a representative government of all people, but for some reason, this is what happens. So what are the things you want to fight for as a Republican? I know this isn't what we had planned to talk about, but
yeah.
this is so interesting to me, and I didn't know this.
Legislatively,
Yeah,
or oh gosh, I mean, one thing for sure is a big issue is just agency accountability. We spend an enormous amount of money, and um, the people that I represent really don't feel like they're getting their money's worth
right.
with the amount of taxes they're paying. So it's not like we don't realize, we all have to contribute taxes, but we want to make sure that it's being used in an efficient manner. And we're just not feeling that. We're not feeling that. So we're really looking for agency accountability. Uh, that's a big one. And what accompanies that is we don't want any more tax increases. We're completely adamantly opposed to more taxes.
And the Democrats are already saying that's one of their
No,
plans.
the Democrats are already signaling that the governor's budget calls for more money than uh, wants to spend more money than we know we're going to bring in revenue. We're going to throw money at the homeless situation. We're going to throw more money at education, when I don't think money's our problem in those areas, but we're going to be spending billions in those areas.
So don't you already pay a ton for each student? I mean, you're
Oh
one
yeah.
of the higher ones, and what's your I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know your your education rate, whatever they call that, is not real high.
No, we're down near the bottom, I believe, in outcomes if you measure student outcomes.
So how do you get more people involved in the process? Because I think people start hearing stuff like this and they almost shut down. You're out talking to people, so you know way
Mm-hmm.
more than I do. But usually, if you're going to a meeting, if someone it takes the time to go to a meeting, they care. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I
Oh,
think
I
you have a
know,
lot
and
of people
that's
that
the
just
thing. A lot of my time is spent talking to people who do care. They show up. They're
right.
coming. They're coming to hear me talk, or they're coming to an event that I'm participating in. So we have a huge chunk of the population that is really disengaged, and I know that because I was one of them. I wasn't
'Cause You're
very
just
engaged
you're
for.
just like a regular businessman.
I'm a
You're
business guy. I'm building my business. I'm taking care of my family. I'm doing my thing, and I stayed as far away from government as I could. I really wasn't intimately involved in what was going on at the state level. I paid attention to national politics, but not state. And I think most Oregonians are like that. So they're not making when they vote, they're not making educated votes, and some of them aren't even voting at all.
What surprised you the most when you stepped out of
Mhm.
I mean, because you're still in the business world, but when you stepped into this new political legislative world, what surprised you the most?
What surprised me the most is you get in this building and we are doing things that I know are not popular with Oregonians, and yet we do it. And I wonder, why do Oregonians Why do Oregonians put up with it?
Can you give
Because
me
I know they're unpopular.
can you give me an example?
Well, uh, what happened with decriminalizing hard drugs?
I thought they changed that.
Well, we did recriminalize hard drugs, but that was not going to go anywhere except it got a huge outpouring from the public, and the public started paying attention, and there was a threat of a ballot measure uh, to let the people overturn it, and that's the only reason they changed that. I'll give you a couple that fall into the moral category. Overwhelmingly, Oregonians don't want boys competing in girls' sports.
Right.
Okay. Well, we're going to try again to get a hearing on a bill that would prevent that. But good luck even getting a discussion on that topic. Yeah.
So they have an ideology and an agenda, and they're just going for that. Not really the representative form of government is supposed to be you go in and do what your clients ask you to do.
Yeah.
And they're not even it's so arrogant, Ed. I mean,
yeah, I had a couple bills. I'll give you another example. This is more of a, it's not one of the big issues, but it's an important issue, and it has to do with honoring healthcare licenses from other states. And there's a system in place where you can join an interstate licensure compact where you honor licenses from other states. One of the big ones is a nurse licensure compact. So it works great. The nurses like it because it makes their license portable. The employers like it because it gives them access to qualified nurses, and we have a nursing shortage.
Can I guess who doesn't like it?
Yeah, the
union
leadership didn't like it, even though they polled their membership, and I think it was 89% of their membership approved of it, but the leadership wouldn't do it. And if the nurse leadership wouldn't support it, then not one single Democrat in that building would support it. I had support quietly, but they would not come out and support it because they would not go against the union leadership. So this is a bill that would be the public would accept.
Right.
Right. The employees wanted it. The employers wanted it.
But because unions run the state.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I have another one that I introduced. I was preparing to introduce for psychiatrists. I had the licensing board of psychiatry announced to us in legislative days 2 months ago that they supported this, and they were preparing a bill themselves. Then a few weeks later, they tell us after they met with the governor's office, we've been told we no longer support this bill.
It's really good old-fashioned bullying. You know what I mean?
It is bullying. It is bullying. And they're doing it because they know where the campaign money is coming from. Right. And it doesn't really matter if it represents the popular interests of Oregonians.
But it doesn't.
They are answering to this small but vocal and extreme side of their supporters. So it's really frustrating. That's probably the biggest thing that frustrates me. I knew that was influential, but I didn't think I'd see people voting against what the majority of Oregonians support.
So let's talk about the barred owl, because that was what our conversation was going to be about. But this is so interesting. I mean, I think I like having you on here because we can just go wherever we want to, because I think people need to sit and listen and go, oh my gosh, and I want to get to this and remind me if we get to the end to do this is what you see that Oregonians could do better. You know what I mean? To get involved with this, because and whatever those ideas are, I want people, because I honestly believe, because I love Oregon with all my heart, I think people really do want what's best for the state, a bunch of them, but they're not heard. And that's their biggest frustration right now, is it's not even that they're not heard, they're completely ignored.
Yes. And I hear the frustration, and something that I've started, that you and I've talked about, this Oregon Freedom Coalition, what I want to show them, this will be a grassroots movement, but part of it is a core group of legislators that are committed to conservative values and are committed to voting that way in the legislature. I want to show Oregonians that there are people in this building listening to them and voting to turn this state around. And they just don't feel that right now.
And this is where I think it could get really interesting when Trump takes over on Monday.
Yeah.
Is because it's you've already seen on the national stage where, I mean, I still get them barking at me online, but it's less, and it's not popular anymore to blame everything on Trump for the masses. I mean, there's still the group that are doing it, Gavin, but it's like I can stand up now pretty comfortably and say I'm supporting Donald Trump. Yeah. Whereas in 2016, I never told anybody because I'd lose my business. And the pendulum is turned, and all of a sudden they're starting to see a guy who's working with Zuckerberg, a guy who's working with Elon Musk, with Bobby Kennedy, with all these different characters, Tulsi Gabbard. All these people are now coming in and going to probably be in the cabinet, and all of a sudden it's going to cause Oregonians, I think, to look and go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We've been for 50 years shoved down this tube that just keeps more narrow. And now you're so close to the edge because there's no wiggle room. And I think people are going to go, we don't have to do that anymore.
No, we don't. I'll tell you a story about that. So I went to the barber, my barber the other day, and she's a younger lady. She's got bright red, dyed hair, and she's covered with tattoos, and she's got piercings and listens to some crazy music sometimes, but she's a great barber and a very nice person. And so I've never talked to her about politics because she has a razor in her hand, all the time. But I walk in there and she's talking to another barber and another guy getting his haircut about the stand your ground laws in Oregon. And she's saying, I don't feel safe in my town anymore. And I don't feel like I can protect myself. And they started talking about the illegal immigration and some of the violence, and the hospitals are seeing an uptick of violence related to that. And they were talking about, some of the things we've seen going on in Colorado are happening in Salem and happening in Eugene. And then she comes around in front of me and says, I don't know what you think about Trump, but he's the only guy that is speaking the truth about these issues. And then I said, well, actually, I'm a Republican state representative.
What did she think? What did she do?
Oh, she was like, oh.
See, I think that's the same thing. I think there's too many people, like you and me and folks like that. I mean, you and I are more political, but I think there's too many people who are saying, wait a minute. You put all these felonies against him when this is not even, it's a misdemeanor case at the best, and you're calling him a felon. And I mean, they've made him into a hero. And so let me ask you this. And if you don't know, just tell me, that's fine. Yeah. But what could, if Tina Kotek and the Democrats decide they're going to spend $1 million to try to fight Trump, can he just pull federal funding from the state of Oregon and say, screw you?
My understanding is, yes, he can pull federal funding. If we're not complying with federal law in certain cases, I'm pretty sure that that's in the works.
Yeah. And I think that's what they're scared about. But I wonder how taxpayers in Oregon feel about the party in charge of their government spending their $1 million to fight an illegal action. So if these people are here illegally and the federal government says they have to go back, and you fight that, that's you're doing just what you accused Donald Trump of doing, of breaking the law.
Right.
And so now, but you're spending somebody else's money, hardworking Oregonians' money, to fight something that you shouldn't be fighting because it's illegal in the first place.
Yes, that we will be spending money to fight against abiding by federal law. We're going to resist complying with federal law and spend taxpayer money to do it, and run the risk of losing federal funds over it. I'm afraid that's going to come down.
Well, I saw on one of my on page, I won't say who it was, but Val Hoyle, a Democrat congresswoman, who has a little past of her own there. She used to work on, but she voted in, I guess, to along with some of this, to send some of the people back and that kind of thing. And I saw a former lawmaker in Oregon who lives in Eugene, who's very vocal, saying, "I'm so disappointed in her, for doing this because it's people's lives at risk and blah, 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 blah." And it's like, no, it's an illegal action but see, she would have, that lawmaker, I don't think she would have ever done that in a previous administration or before. But now this pendulum has swung hard. I mean, you know what I mean? And usually it takes like years. It kind of comes back a little bit, but you live in other places like Montana. It's swung really hard, and you understand that it's, there's change coming. And I think it's disgusting that your governor is spending taxpayer dollars to fight illegal action. And then your Secretary of State, who's supposed to be someone who works for all people, is taking a position against Trump and the administration and that kind of. He can do that on his personal time, but shut the hell up on your public time. I don't need to hear it.
Well, it is swinging fast. This ideology is built on a house of cards. So many people were just going along because we're taught to be tolerant of other people, and they weren't willing to speak out. There's this Oregon nice kind of attitude. Was that a thing? Oregon nice?
It used to not be like Oregonians. I talked to a miner in Granite, Oregon one time, and she was the only female miner in Granite, which is way over in Wallowa County or Baker County. And she said to me, "Rick, Oregonians are rugged individualists." And she says, and that's a problem, because we don't work together. Sometimes we have our own opinions and we just want to go through and be independent minded. But what happened to that independent mindedness, when it comes to government telling us what to do? It's appalling to me.
Independent minded people don't enter politics. I think they do, like me. For my life, I stayed away from it. I built my own company. And I think a lot of people on our side of the aisle, they're very independent minded, which they're not geared to make collective action at the state level. They just want to be left alone.
Right.
So it creates a real dichotomy there, because the people making the decisions don't have that mentality. The people making the decisions in Oregon believe in a state centrally controlled decision making, a huge role in government. And a large part of our state just wants to be left alone.
Could you imagine a conversation I can with some of the people that I've met in my life in Jordan Valley or Rome, Oregon, or Burns? I'd love to see a conversation with the governor and them and sit down and but I think they're afraid to go do that because they get an earful. And, and whenever you talk about, Oregon, the greater Idaho movement, I hear people from the Portland area, going, well, they can just leave. Well, how long have you lived here? 10, 15 years. Yeah. These people have decades, generations of people, and that's their property. But it's so important to them. They want to keep their land, but they're willing to give up Oregon, which they love, to be free and be able to have somebody listening to them and not restricting every bit of water they have on their property and, cattle grazing. Now you see where California, that I saw an article where they're saying, if they had allowed more animal grazing on some of the land in some of their land and stuff, it's a huge problem. And look what's going to happen. And that will happen in Oregon.
It will happen in Oregon. The BLM is looking at limiting grazing. And, there's an old adage, right? You log it, graze it, or let it burn.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of truth to that. We need to actively manage our lands, and that's forest land, and it's also grassland.
I wonder if people like in the Portland, Multnomah County, that area, if they understand that the cattle, that's where like beef comes from. When they eat a steak at that fancy schwancy restaurant downtown Portland, that's not a vegetarian patty. I mean, that's like a real animal gave his life for that, you know. And then
Yeah.
the shoes they're wearing, also the leather from the animal's hide came. They got the big shoes out of those. You know? All right.
They're,
So talk to me about the owl. So
oh my gosh.
the
Yeah.
spotted owl was in the 90s, and so much what I find, and I just want to put this point out there for people, our lack of forest management in Oregon, in the McKinsey fire, much of the land that was destroyed was spotted owl habitat, and it was not cleared, not thinned, not managed,
Yeah.
because it was supposed to be protecting the owl. So they destroyed the very land that the owl was allegedly needed. And then I think it was I was still in the business, so it was probably in the 2006 or something. They discovered this barred owl was actually the one taking over the habitat of the spotted owl.
You got it. So, I live in the heart of spotted owl country, just a few miles from Mill City. And so the Santiam Canyon is a big chunk of my district. And so we shut down 28 million acres, I think, in the Pacific Northwest for spotted owl habitat. This animal is a sacred animal
To some.
Because it, in their view, saved these forests. Well, we've turned a lot of these forests into tinder boxes because
Right.
we're not doing any thinning. We're not reducing the fuels in a situation so we have a very dry climate. It is drier in the Pacific Northwest. The fires burn hotter. Well, you got to manage them accordingly. So anyway, so after this 30 years of shutting the harvesting down, they still see the spotted owl population in decline and determine that it's cousin, the barred owl. And the barred owl came over from the East Coast. It migrated over here naturally, but it's slightly bigger than the spotted owl. It's more aggressive. It will kill spotted owls. It will invade their nests, and it will also mate with spotted owls. So there's a hybrid owl called the sparred owl, which is a hybrid between the barred and the.
So are these people then against interracial owl marriages?
Yeah. So I don't know if they're killing sparred owls as well. I'm not sure. But the solution in the infinite wisdom of the federal government is, well, we've got to save this owl. So let's hire hunters and kill 450,000 barred owls over a span of many years, costing like $1.3 billion of your tax dollars to kill one type of owl to save another type of owl. And it's just the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. Yeah. So we a group of legislators, and I wrote to.
These are bipartisan.
Yeah. So we have one Democrat, David Gomberg. Yeah. And he's an animal rights activist, and he signed on to this. He sees it as absurd as we do. I would have had a lot more Republicans sign on, but we tried to keep it balanced. We were hoping we'd have more Democrats sign on, but nobody was interested.
Yeah, it seems like an animal rights thing that would be right up their alley.
It does, but what it is, it's kind of divided the environmentalists.
Yeah,
there's some environmentalists that are on our side for sure on this, but there's also a group of environmentalists that are actually hunting and killing barred owls. And that's why I get into this. The spotted owl has become a sacred being that they have to save it at all costs, even if they have to kill another owl. Otherwise, the whole thing's so absurd. If the spotted owl, right now we know that the habitat was not the cause for the demise of the spotted owl. In other words, the reason we shut down logging in the first place is moot. It's gone. Right. So why are we still shut down if that's not the root cause of the spotted owl's decline?
Well, for the Truth About Timber series that I'm working on, I'm doing a story right now on the spotted owl in Montana, which is called the grizzly bear. And the federal government just, our Fish and Wildlife just said they're not going to delist it. And it's so weird, Ed, because, well, because you know this, you're from here. So there's 5 regions where these grizzly bear, they wanted to, the Endangered Species Act was to increase those things. They have way more bears than they need, but they're not all dispersed in these 5 different areas. There's 2 areas where they're really going well, and then the other 3, they're not. But they keep moving bears in there, but there's no habitat for the bears because they don't eat trees. And so they're coming into town and causing all kinds of problems. So we're doing a story. There's a whole bunch more to it. Sometime I'll discuss it anyway. But it's the same thing. It's like, maybe we need to actually follow the science, you know? And I remember when I went out on a story when I was a reporter, and a biologist gave me a live mouse to hold on the tail and a spotted owl that was in the area. He watched it and it came down and took it out of my hand. This is not an animal that's going to last very long because he's not afraid of humans. So, you know what I mean? That's so maybe, and there's some animals that go extinct. You can't keep everything, and they're not all meant to. So if this bird comes in, the bard, and takes over, maybe that's what was supposed to happen.
Right. The Endangered Species Act leads us to these bizarre conclusions. Yeah. It really needs to be modernized.
Well, and with the grizzly bear, they've met their quota. I mean, it never says, so they changed the rules. So they've got way more bears than they need. So what they did is they changed the rules. So we need to have populations in each of these 5 areas. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to increase it to this amount. And then they take them and transplant bears from Yellowstone to the Kootenai, and the bears leave and go back to Glacier. So they don't want to stay there because there's nothing for them to eat. So here's a cool thing you'll like. Another story I'm doing is adaptive management. These loggers are going as logging companies working with a mining company, and they're going in and they're causing distress on the forest by logging, by thinning, and then they're planting the legumes and the things that the elk and the bears feed on. So by logging, they're creating habitat, which is desperately needed there.
Wow.
And reducing the fire. I know. And reducing the fire danger. So they're going in, now they're doing a white paper because they've been doing this for like 5 years. Now they have to get a white paper so when they go to court, they can fight it. But here they are. So the guy says, so what do we do? And I said, the first thing you do is there's no more loggers. They're now habitat restoration specialists. So Ed, that is the perfect world to me, is you've got these people coming up with ideas, creative, and thinking and going, what do we need? Hey, we could do both. We can log, but the environmentalists don't want that. Or not the anti-timber people. They want to lock all those roads up. And what they don't understand is that's yours and mine. That's public land.
That's public land. Those roads serve so many purposes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the governor talked about this today. Wildfire. We got to fund wildfires. We've turned this multi-billion-dollar asset in Oregon, the most beautiful forest land, in some of the most beautiful in the world,
most productive
in the world.
Yeah.
We've turned this multi-billion-dollar asset into a liability. So now we have to take public tax dollars to mediate or mitigate fire risk when these lands were producing revenue, tons of revenue. They were paying for our schools. Our rural communities were very wealthy and prosperous. And I don't want to cut all this stuff down. I just want some balance in this decision.
They don't know. There's people out there in the audience that still think they're clear cut. They don't clear cut.
No.
They don't clear cut. So what they also don't understand is the ONC revenues were what funded our schools. So now what's else in that governor's budget? I bet you $1. A ton more money for education if you went in and started thinning forests, rebuilding habitat in those forests, doing fire safety work, you would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You'd not only be funding education, but you'd also be providing wood fiber. You'd be providing jobs. I mean, and all this, and recreating the habitat that all those animals need to live out there. But we are so narrow-minded.
To me, it seems like a win-win, because what we did when we locked up our forests, for one, we took the revenue away to the schools. So we have to backfill that with taxpayer dollars. And then we created tinder boxes in our forests. So now we have to spend more taxpayer dollars to fight that.
Yeah.
It's complete nonsense.
Well, the big lie too is that, just let Mother Nature take care of it.
No.
Mother Nature's harsh, and
Yeah.
she is not a friendly girl.
No.
So when you don't take care of a forest, and we haven't been logging, we'd had Smokey Bear, and so we stopped letting forest fires burn, which is natural. And now we've got this, situation where you've got no fires, you got all this stuff on the ground, just like in California. And all it's going to take is another windstorm like we had before, and you're going to blow up the valley.
Yeah. And I just don't want to live this way. I don't want to live with raging wildfires periodically, but that's what we will have if we don't manage it. And I don't see how it's helping if your goal is to sequester carbon. Do you think? I think that what California just experienced has blown anything that they did with any of their carbon green energy projects. They just burned that away.
Well, that week,
decades of it.
That week of fires over Labor Day a few years ago, I saw a report that said that the amount of smoke that went into the air in those 2 to 3 weeks was more than the entire year of Portland with cars, pollution, industry, and all that.
Yeah.
That's what they don't get is you're going to pay. And, in Oregon is, remember when you didn't have to plan your summer vacation away from Oregon in the September and August, and, you could go on a camping trip and knew you weren't going to breathe smoke. I saw the AFRC had a study out, and I can't remember the numbers, but it was showing how many people were getting cancer from the smoke that is now in the air from forest fires and stuff. It's tragic.
But we'll ban wood-fired stoves.
And natural gas.
And natural
gas. And then we want to blow up all those dams so we can depend more on and then we can depend more on coal to power our electric cars. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how people come on and say, you need to educate yourself. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, the amount of ridiculousness in all of this is crazy.
Well, I think it's being highlighted in California right now.
Yeah.
The level of incompetence.
Yeah.
And it appears to be in part related to DEI. I don't know if that's
I think that's part of it. And it's not paying attention to the water situation. And you just let things go. I think their governor is more interested in planning his presidential run in 28 or whatever it is than he is taking care of his state.
They just had their eye off the ball.
Yeah.
They had their eye off the ball, and they had managers who were not focused on what their real job was.
So if you could get one thing done this year, what will that be?
If I can get one thing done
legislatively.
Well, what I would really like to do is have some changes with election integrity. I would require proof of citizenship to register to vote, and I would have voter ID.
Yep.
Now, these things will be brought. I'm signing on to some legislation with Representative Juncker to that effect. I'm sure we'll have a lot of other representatives sign on to it. I don't think it'll even get a hearing, but I think that would probably be one of the most significant things we could do.
Yeah, I think if Oregon could start requiring, I mean, in Montana, I don't get the hysteria about. I think most Oregonians probably think you should have ID, but to mention it gets you castrated.
80%, I think, of Americans polled, and I'm sure that's pretty uniform across the country.
I mean, what's the big deal?
You should have an ID to vote.
I have to do it if I want to buy alcohol, even at my old age. I mean, I still have to show it to them. You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty obvious I'm not 21. I've done that 3 times now.
They don't make me show it, Rick. You just look.
I think it's just to get me back. But Montana, we go in. I would like to see Oregon get rid of the mail-in ballot, and I know that's a tough number.
That's that. I mean,
corruption.
The mail-in opens the door to a lot of shenanigans. Unfortunately, it's not very secure. That's a tough one to sell. I don't think Oregonians are ready for that.
No, I don't either. But I'll tell you what, I love in Montana, and I vote early, but I still get to go to
Mhm.
the courthouse. They have a little box set up, the little stand,
Yep.
and I go in, I show my ID, get my little ballot, go in, cast my vote. They give you a little sticker, and I love that because it feels like I did.
It
If
feels
a person can't,
significant. Yeah.
yes, and if you don't have the energy to get up and go vote, then please don't.
Don't vote.
Yeah,
I would allow early voting just like you described,
yeah,
and I would have a voting holiday.
yep,
Pick a day, and everybody gets the day off. It's a federal holiday, and we vote. We do
yeah,
our civic duty together,
yeah.
and vote. And I think it has more significance. Um, and I don't think it's a bad thing to be intentional about voting.
No,
Right now, you can what we saw go on is you just have people going out harvesting ballots,
yeah,
sh- showing them how to fill them out. People who don't even we know this for a fact in some districts they're not informed voters. They can't even read the ballot. They're being told how to mark the ballot.
yeah, yeah. Who would you vote for?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. If you're not going to do your homework, then I don't think it's worth it. So on this spotted owl or the barred owl, where does that go? So you created the legislation. Does that have to pass in Oregon then?
Well, this is a federal issue, so it's not legislative. So we wrote a letter to Doge, the Department of
Oh,
Government Efficiency.
oh, to Vivek and
Yes, so to
Elon.
Elon Musk and Vivek
Oh, so you're going to
Ramaswamy.
get their ass on this, and then
Yes, we
oh,
believe this is a good story. It is a complete boondoggle, a waste of taxpayer money. It deserves their attention. I'm working on another thing with legislators in Washington too, that we're going to be bringing to Doge. I hope. I can talk to you more about that later. But yeah, we hope this gets their attention.
that is a great idea, Ed. You guys are smart, you know? I mean, well, if you put enough of you together.
Yeah, yeah, right. No, it was a fun one to do because it does highlight kind of it highlights the absurdity of the Endangered Species Act. It highlights the absurdity in how we're managing our resources, and it's a great thing for Doge to look at as far as taxpayer.
You know,
Abuse.
as an Oregonian who's living in Montana, I just had this feeling that Oregon's on the rebound. You know what I mean?
Boy,
I
I
I don't
wouldn't
live
be
there, and
doing this stupid job if I didn't think that was the case, that we could turn this thing around.
no, I think it can, and I get criticized from people, and they'll go, "Well, you moved away." And I said, "Yeah, but sometimes you can fight better from far away when you could see
Yeah.
clearer, you know." And well, Ed Deal, thank you so much for what you're doing to serve Oregon, and I like the fact that you kind of carry a screwdriver and kind of go, and and bring in your businessman experience, and yeah,
Yeah.
we'll talk
Well,
again when you get closer to launching the
the Freedom Coalition,
coalition.
absolutely. Yeah,
We'll talk
I'm
again.
excited about that, and we've got a good core group of legislators that are excited. And every group I've talked to is like, I want to know more. How do I help?
All right.
So it's
Stay in
good.
the green room for a second, and I'll come
You
back
bet.
and talk to you when I get rid of these guys. Hold on. Did you hear that? I said, get rid of you guys. Isn't that terrible? Well, you know what I mean. Don't take me too seriously. So there you go, guys. You can do it. I have total faith in my Oregon, and I think you can do this. But you have to be informed. You have to listen to things like Ed's talking about. What your governor's priorities are. Are they yours? Does that line up with you? Do you want your governor to spend $1 million of your tax dollars to fight the illegal actions that they're doing because the Trump administration is going to shut that down? Oh, and do you want your state to face risk losing federal dollars to go to schools and other hospitals and other things like that because you have a few people at the top who want to be known as a virtuous sanctuary city, which is really just a organization that is providing illegal services for people that should not be here? Is that what you want? I don't think that sounds like Oregon. And you can take it back. And I don't think you have to be a Republican to do this. There's a lot of smart, wonderful Democrats out there, and you're going bullshit on this, and you need to pull together. And all you independents, yeah, I realize you don't want to get involved, but guess what? You kind of have to if you live there. And all you non-affiliated voters, get off your ass and go do something. Okay. Because just because you're non-affiliated doesn't mean you can't do it. I've been non-affiliated for 15 years. I'm pretty damn involved, and you need to be too. I'm Rick Dancer. This is Get Real. Please share this on your page so other people see it, because you really need your state to buckle in together and get together on this stuff. And you need to be paying attention all this legislative session to things that are going on. And just because things happen that you don't like, that means you check it down and you write it and you go, okay, what am I going to do about that? And when you see somebody coming to your town and having a meeting, go to the damn meeting. I'm Rick Dancer. Have a great night. I'll see, all the time. Bye-bye.